The PocketBook InkPad 4 is the fourth InkPad, or is it actually the fifth? Well, let's go with the fourth generation, and it is the best PocketBook has released so far. The InkPad 4 stays true to the line and brings a couple of improvements over the previous models. It still has a 7.8-inch display, but this time around with E-Ink Carta 1200 technology, which is the best there is at the moment. The front is now flush again, same as with the very first generation, and there is an inbuilt speaker for listening to audiobooks now. But most importantly, the InkPad 4 is embracing openness software-wise and isn't trying to tie you down to a single provider like many other e-readers are doing it. So let's check out what's so special about this device in more detail and also answer the question if you should take a closer look. If you know PocketBook, the design of the InkPad 4 is familiar. It's a mix of the previous generation and the PocketBook era. It got a flush, pretty scratch-resistant glass front, small bezels on the top and on the sides, and is one of the very few e-readers that actually still has physical buttons. I think having the buttons on the bottom of the screen isn't as nice ergonomically as having them on the side, like with the PocketBook era, but in the end, it's a matter of personal preference, so I'm not holding it against the PocketBook InkPad 4. In any case, PocketBook did an awesome job with the button design. The two page turn buttons have this three-dimensional shape, which helps in finding the buttons with your fingers without looking. Even though the button design is seamless, so there isn't a gap between the buttons, it's easy to use them without looking. And I never had a problem with accidental presses. What's also nice is the option to change their functions. You can remap the buttons and personalize how you use the e-reader. The rest of the InkPad 4 is also well designed. The frame feels high quality even though it's plastic. Only the back of the device feels a bit cheap because of the ripped plastic. It's not too bad, but could definitely be better. But on the bright side, the design helps in securing a better grip. And what's also great about this new material mix is that I doubt it will develop to have the same problems as some older PocketBook models had with the soft touch materials, because when aging, those sometimes started to become sticky, which was annoying as hell. I suspect that won't happen with the InkPad 4 and other new PocketBook devices, because they don't have the same coating, but time will tell. There's also a pretty clever cover attachment integrated into the back of the device. You can pull this smaller part of the back cover off and pop in this front cover, which is unfortunately not in the box and costs a little extra. Some of you who have been following the e-reading market for a long time might remember the Sony PRS-T3, which was Sony's last e-reader. It had a similar solution where the front cover was attached to the back plate of the device. I loved the super lightweight screen protection back then, and I do love it now on the InkPad 4 as well. The cover also has a sleep function, so opening it will wake up the e-reader and closing it will put it into standby. And unlike some other manufacturers' covers, it also stays closed when turning it a little thanks to the integrated magnets. On the bottom of the frame, we have the USB-C connector, and on the right side is the speaker. There is no microSD card expansion, unfortunately, unlike the regular InkPad 3 model had, but the internal storage now has 32 gigs, of which around 28 gigs are accessible, which should be enough for most users. The PocketBook InkPad 4 has a 2000 mAh battery, which is a very good size for an e-reader. With average use, you can expect this device to power through several weeks without needing a recharge. And not to forget, the InkPad 4 is also IPX8 water resistant, so in addition to the scratch-resistant screen, that also adds a bit of peace of mind. All in all, I really like the refined design of the PocketBook InkPad 4, and handling the e-reader feels good as well, even though at 265 grams it's noticeably heavier than its predecessor. The only thing I really don't like about it is that it creaks and cracks a little when gripping it more firmly. Not a huge deal, but still shouldn't be the case, obviously. The 7.8-inch Ink Carta 1200 screen has a resolution of 300 ppi and looks great. Contrast levels aren't as excellent as on the Kobo Libra 2 or Kindle Paperwhite, which also use the same ink technology, but the inkpad doesn't need to take the backseat either. Text is readable easily and better than on the already good previous inkpad generations. So that criticism is a bit nitpicky, to be honest, but still good to know for pixel peepers. There's obviously also an integrated frontlight with an adjustable color temperature. The frontlight only has a very slight brightness gradient, but isn't really noticeable during normal use. It also helps that the LEDs are located at the bottom of the screen. So all in all, the inkpad 4 does better in terms of screen quality than the PocketBook Era, and actually has one of the more even front lights in this size segment. Oh, and before I forget, the latest firmware also introduced a dark mode, which inverts the colors on the screen, so white text on a dark background. If you enjoy reading before bedtime, this option lets you cut down on light exposure even more, making it more comfortable for your eyes. Ghosting is obviously more of an issue in dark mode, same as with any other manufacturer, but all in all still manageable. Without using the dark mode, ghosting isn't as noticeable and can even be further reduced by changing the frequency of full page refreshes. Let's talk about the software. PocketBook e-readers were for quite a while something of an under the radar choice. They consistently offered powerful features but struggled a bit on the ease of use front. But as you've heard me say in my past PocketBook reviews, this is no longer the case. The company has invested heavily in optimizing the user interface this past couple of years and managed to streamline the most problematic aspects to the point where I can say that their e-readers are now among the best in terms of merging simplicity and functionality. And that's also true for the PocketBook InkPad 4. The UI is intuitive to use and has many useful options, which I'll come to in a second. First, I want to mention that PocketBook probably also makes the least locked down e-readers out there. You can use the InkPad 4 without signing up for any service. Besides not being able to buy anything from the integrated ebook shop, everything else keeps working even if you don't log into an account. But if you want to have the comfort of using the integrated ebook store, that's obviously an option as well, which I'll talk a bit more about at the end of the video. Even though bits and pieces make it look like it, the InkPad 4 doesn't run Android. It uses a custom UI. And as I mentioned, there are quite a few personalization options, like being able to adapt the home screen to hide the shop recommendations, changing the shortcuts on the home screen, or adapting the quick links in the notification area. The only thing I don't like about it is that it sometimes takes a bit too long to react to my input. Mostly after powering it on and launching specific functions for the first time, it can be a little sluggish to react. It's not horrible, but especially Amazon e-readers feel snappier in comparison. But once you use the function, that sluggishness disappears, and the next time you use it, it works quickly. The library is the best in the e-reading space and offers plenty of filtering and sorting options. And it works with Calibra tags or the file system's folder structure. So however you have your ebooks organized right now, you can keep using either system. What's a bit unconventional here is the way you navigate the library. Instead of swiping horizontally or page per page, it is using a continuous scroll by default. Don't get me wrong, it works great, but needs a little getting used to coming from other systems. But if you prefer the usual page turn way of navigating through a library, you can do so as well with either the physical page turn buttons or the virtual buttons in the corners of the screen. Again, that just shows how versatile the UI is, giving users different options how to interact with the system. I love it. Inside an ebook, you also have a couple of functions and options. You can change the text styling to also install your own fonts if needed. There is a dictionary function with the largest selection of freely available dictionaries in the e-reading space, which you can easily install with a tab. You can find the full list in the description below. The dictionaries work well in general. However, depending on the language, they often only identify words in their infinitive form. But PocketBook has heard the criticism and implemented morphological dictionaries. Those should help to improve the accuracy, but to be honest, at least for German, doesn't seem to do much at the moment. So let's see if that gets better in the future. The note-taking feature on the InkPad 4 is also quite good, offering multiple functions including filtering and exporting options. You can either type out your notes using the built-in virtual QWERTY keyboard, or you can handwrite them directly on the page. However, you'll need to toggle the right mode before starting, and also keep in mind that handwriting only works with your fingers or a capacitive pen. So this isn't the same natural writing experience that you'll find on Android tablets with a Wacom screen. There's also a text-to-speech function available in many different languages, which works well and allows the device to read the contents of an ebook out loud. That works via the integrated speaker or with compatible Bluetooth devices. The quality of the integrated speaker is good and even a bit better than on the PocketBook Era. Nothing to brag about, obviously, but easily good enough to listen to the text-to-speech function and audiobooks, which I'll come to in a second. The text-to-speech function can be useful as an aid for people with a visual impairment, those who are learning to read, or simply if you can't look at the screen and still want to know what's in the book. As it reads, the InkPad underlines the current position. And although the voice synthesis is definitely not as good as a professional speaker, which isn't a surprise, obviously, it's not bad at all. So let's listen to how that sounds.
"His simplicity itself," he remarked, chuckling at my surprise, "so absurdly simple that an explanation is superfluous. And yet it may serve to define the limits of observation and of deduction. Observation tells me that you have a little reddish mold adhering to your instep. Just opposite the Seymour Street office they have taken up the pavement and thrown up some earth which lies in such a way that it is difficult to avoid treading in it in entering. The earth is of this peculiar reddish tint which is found, as far as I know, nowhere else in the neighborhood. So much is observation. The rest is deduction."
Besides the text-to-speech function, there's also the option to listen to audiobooks and music. Both are available from within their respective apps. And what's great about it is that this system is built to be open. You can use any MP3 files and aren't tied to a single shop. The only downside of it is that you can't use proprietary services like Audible, but that's a small price to pay for more independence if you ask me. Handling PDFs on the PocketBook InkPad 4 is also a satisfying experience, thanks to the software's several useful viewing options. What immediately stands out when looking at large format PDF files is the device's high pixel density. Even large format PDF files are readable. Sure, squinting at tiny text isn't ideal for reading, but it does provide a quick overview and can be used for skimming through text. For more comfortable reading, you can zoom in either using the pinch to zoom feature or by selecting from the PDF modes. While these aren't quite as comprehensive as what you'd find on Onyx Books Android tablets, they easily outperform the competition from Kindle, Kobo, Nook, or Tolino. My personal standout is the columns mode. Depending on the setting, it zooms in on a quarter or sixth of the page. The cropped view then progresses from top to bottom and then from left to right until you reach the end of the page. This mode is awesome when reading scientific papers. And taking notes is as easy as I mentioned earlier. You can either use the QWERTY keyboard or activate the handwriting mode to directly scribble notes on the page. However, only notes made with the QWERTY keyboard can be exported to an HTML file. Handwritten notes aren't exportable. They appear with a reference to the location, but without a copy of what was written on the page. In conjunction with its cloud integration, PocketBook overhauled the integrated ebook store a few years ago. The outcome? It's not only aesthetically more pleasing, but also more functional. Every purchase you make syncs automatically with the PocketBook Cloud and the e-reader itself. My only gripe with the shop is the search function. More often than not, it lists the book I'm looking for at a lower position instead of highlighting it at the top where it should be. For instance, if I search for Lord of the Rings, the actual book only shows up at the 14th position. And this isn't an isolated issue, which can be a bit frustrating. But funnily enough, the live search function, which shows you a couple of search results during typing, works more reliably, which minimizes this problem overall. And if you don't want to use the integrated shop or don't want to use it exclusively, you can also use the internet browser, which works pretty well, not just for other shops, but generally for surfing the web. There's also an option to use Dropbox to sync a folder on your computer, which is also a neat option. Okay, so that brings me to the conclusion, and let's get straight to the point. In my eyes, the PocketBook InkPad 4 isn't just the best reading device PocketBook has ever released, but it's also the best e-reader in the 8-inch size segment right now. The mix of its crisp, easily readable display, even frontlight, and the extensive intuitive software makes for an awesome overall package. PocketBook has spent the last few years fine-tuning its UI to enhance the user experience, and the result, an interface that rivals the best in the e-reading market and doesn't shy away from the competition. In fact, other manufacturers should take a page out of PocketBook's book, especially when it comes to privacy and functionality. Now, the PocketBook InkPad 4 isn't perfect. It does have a few drawbacks, but none of them are deal breakers as far as I'm concerned. The biggest hurdle, in my opinion, is the price tag. At around 290 euros, it's a bit steep. As the device itself, the only notable downside is the somewhat creaky casing. When not a major issue, it's something you wouldn't expect at this price point. Another minor problem is the occasional sluggishness of the UI. But all in all, with its many strengths and only very few weaknesses, the PocketBook InkPad 4 made a great impression. If you're in the market for an e-reader right now, this one deserves serious consideration. And also please consider liking and subscribing if you found this review helpful. Thanks for time watching and see you on the next one.